My anger has become a sad acceptance of human ambition, the relentless waves of wealth and debt that may go hungry with no landscapes left to feed their souls or flesh.
The landscape of the United States is changing. From their origins as small farm communities, cities have become thriving urban centers.
Rivers of cars and trucks compressed, between houses stacked like cordwood, between parking lots and mini-malls ready to serve anonymous strangers.
Their boundaries advancing year by year, consuming space once graced by amber waves of grain and pastures with dots of cattle.
Usurp more earth, sterilize and seal it from the sun and rain.
Pushing farms further out into the seemingly endless supply of land. But that land supply isn't endless, and it's rapidly disappearing.
You just cannot have much of a farming operation in that kind of surroundings.
The farm to the left of me is people own it or trying to sell it.
As a result, the security of our food supply and the future of America's farmers hang in the balance.
I view farming as our future. If we don't get farming right, we just can't hope for a sustainable future.
John Piotti leads American Farmland Trust, whose research brought this issue to national attention.
Urban sprawl is what happens when development begins to encroach on areas that had been rural. We knew we were losing farmland, but we've been able to pull together the best data that has ever existed on this stuff, and it's shown that we're actually losing farmland almost twice as fast as we thought before. And the numbers are 1.5 million acres a year, 175 acres every hour, so 3 acres a minute. And it is alarming, it should be alarming. That is an irreplaceable resource. Some loss of farmland is inevitable, but that level is simply unsustainable.
I haven't been back here but about 4 times in 14 years. It's a little bit emotional.
Born and raised in Gwinnett County, Georgia, John Lovin grew up farming, running Angus cattle and raising chickens with his father on the same farm his family established in 1841.
66, I got my first Angus heifer and Angus bull, and we showed at the local fair and had champion bull and heifer, and that kind of hooked me. These were the chicken houses. That's growed up after my mother. Well, my mother was still alive. My dad had passed away. She had had breast surgery, and it rained. Had a good summer, and we cut up. I hear my dad talking to me a lot every day, and my mother. As I got older, we continued on the farming and increased the cattle. In 1980, I married my lovely wife, and we raised 4 children here. Lived here about 25 years.
Under the mounting pressures of urban sprawl, John, Leanne, and their children left the land for the last time in August of 2004.
Emotionally, leaving the farm in Tequila, it was hard, knowing what was going to happen to the place I grew up and the ground that I used to play on and have cows on and bottle feed baby calves and stuff on.
It was hard for John, and that's kind of where it bothered me to see my husband be forced to leave somewhere that he loved. It was hard on me, you know.
When we came back about the first time to see what was going on, they were grading for the development, and I had to go up here on top of the hill, and I cried pretty hard, so to see what all had been done. I've only been through here one time, so kind of cold chills are running through me right now. We had a barn in the middle, pretty much, of the subdivision, and then our house was up on the far end up here on the main road. Most of this, they came in here, and I'm just telling you, when I came back the first time, they had it just, I mean, tore all the pieces, I say, graded up, and you know, everything was gone. There wasn't anything left. Old saying, the old gray mule ain't what she used to be. No. We had a wonderful life here. It was the times we spent together. I'm sorry. Gwinnett was the fastest growing county in the nation. I'm going to say probably through the 90s. It was a rural county when we grew up, but in the 70s and 80s it exploded, and it was mainly towards the Atlanta area, and then it just began to creep out. The sprawl has really come to Atlanta.
Outside of Atlanta, which is one of the fastest growing cities in America, we've lost a lot of farmland, a disproportionate amount of farmland.
It was a small city at one time. You used to get to the Atlanta city limits and not see anything till you got there.
It has been a fast growing area that has a lot of really good farmland around it. But nationally, we haven't necessarily thought of it as a real farming area. There's just not the same kind of appreciation for farming as you might find in parts of the Midwest or the Far West.
And it's not here just in Atlanta area. You know, it's nationwide, and where you go and travel and see, and you see housing development going up everywhere.
If you think about where most of our cities are located, the early pioneers plopped them down in the right places, which means often the right places for farming, because they were farmers at that time. So much of our really good land is close to urban locations, and that's the land that we have lost the fastest and continue to lose.
Not all land is created equal. Less than 6% of the Earth's surface is suitable for growing food, and 10% of that arable land is located in the United States, accounting for less than 1/5 of the country, and that land is highly sought after for development, contributing to the total loss of 31 million acres of farmland in 20 years, enough to cover all Iowa's farms in concrete.
I think I built about 4,000 of these lots in my career.
Mark Nelson, a developer turned rancher in Sacramento, California, explains the reason for this trend.
You know why they picked the flat ground like this, the prime farm ground? Because sewer and drain water has to have a what they call a fall. It has to slope in order to get where it's going. So they pick flat ground like this because it's the absolute cheapest to develop.
We need development. We need to have prosperous communities. Our population is going to increase, but we need to balance that against the fact that our farmland and our ranch land is what produces our food and sustains us as a society. So we need to be smart about it.
Well, in California, urban sprawl is here to stay, mainly around the big population centers like the LA Basin, the Bay Area, Silicon Valley, Sacramento.
California is our largest agricultural engine in the country when it comes to specialty crops, fruits, vegetables, and the like. And it literally feeds us and helps feed the world. But all the things that make it a great place to farm also make it a place where a lot of people want to live.
Because of the job centers that these have become, people move here and they want a better house or a better school, so they move a little farther out, and you end up with urban sprawl. And it's unfortunate, but I think it's here to stay. I don't think they can draw a line around a city and stop it. They tried that in Elk Grove, and every time they got to the line, they moved the line.
So it's one of these places where we have this clash between, I want to live in California, but you can't put so many people in the landscape without taking away good farmland. So California, in my mind, is a sort of great example of all of the challenges that we face as a globe. There's no reason we should ever have a housing development on land that is so precious and globally important.
Some of the best agricultural land in the state of Georgia has went to development. Around the Chattahoochee River, there was some great agricultural land there, and it's all developed. And it continues out and up the expressways, 85, 75, north to the mountains. God didn't create any more land, and we've got to be a very good steward of what we have.
In these hills, a man finds space that feels familiar and friendly. Perhaps it is the shards of light diffused at dawn upon the many-legged oaks standing knee-deep in grasses on the near ridge that shield us from man's square creations, his cubic thinking. But there are places that ask nothing else of us but to breathe.
The development, the subdivision is right about here, because here's the old road going up to one of the hay barns, and we did have a working facility there, and but it's basically right down here in this little draw right here, and of course the road is different now.
While the loss of land is devastating to the agriculture community, it is, of course, inevitable as the population grows. People must have homes to live in, and these places, too, become landscapes of relationships and memories where families thrive.
I tell you, when we first got here, man, there was nothing back here. These were the only houses here. They had houses here. These were the first houses in the neighborhood. Him and his wife would get off work and sit right there on the side of that street and watch his house being built every day. Like a religion, they were here. And I knew the feeling because I came out here every single day while they were finishing up our house. I was just having so much fun, hoping and praying that the neighborhood would turn out like it started. I'm originally from Michigan, and my area was so bad at one point after they had closed all the schools, closed up all the car companies. And I come here And all of a sudden, it became Wendell is the mayor of the neighborhood. So,
mayor, right?
we just went through that. I come from a big family. It was 8 boys and 2 girls, so I like to talk a lot. Amy, you got to meet these guys.
Hey, superstar.
No, that's Miss Addison. That's my baby. People in the afternoon, everybody's out walking if they've got small kids.
This is like Uncle Wendell to everybody.
This is my main man right here. The kids during the summer at the pool hanging together. All right, sweetie, I'll see you later, okay?
Say bye, say see ya. See ya.
Everybody it's a really big family community. This is Mr. Noel. You guys, this is Lindsay. Her trip just went in the house. That's who I was speaking to.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I think he just went around the corner because our AC unit is not working upstairs, and if it doesn't get to working, we're gonna die tonight.
Our yards are usually together.
No. This is like yard of the month.
No.
Yard of the year, like you see him out here, he's out there mowing the lawn every day, hitting those perfect lines in the yard.
That is funny. And I mean, you're talking about a blessing. It turned out better than what I thought.
But even for Wendell and the rest of the urban population, the threat of urban sprawl looms. We may not feel the loss of each acre, but we are losing something little by little that we can't live without.
We don't have the luxury of losing even 3% of our land over a period of time because we basically need that land now. And as population grows, we're going to need it even more.
There are more of us, a lot more. Since 2010, the population of Gwinnett County, Georgia has grown by more than 120,000. The population of America has grown by 20 million. And each year, the world population grows by 82 million. To feed the world in 2050, we will need to produce nearly 1 billion tons more grain and over 200 million tons more meat every year. And all of this will be done with a dwindling farming population working on fewer and fewer acres of land.
So it's sort of a double whammy. We're both have greater needs and at the same time we're losing our ability to grow food. You have to only go back a short distance in history to realize that horrible things happen when countries can't satisfy many of their own needs. That leads to famine, that leads to war, that leads to a whole bunch of economic and societal disruptions. I would never want America to be in a position where we did not have plenty of land to not only serve our own needs, but to help provide food for the rest of the planet.
What sweet perfection this planet blessed to feed itself, whose wildness beckons men to tame her. We have been fruitful, hungry for her bounties, hobbled by ignorance. Her distant whine on the wind from town begs relief and a certain change in direction.
But what is stopping the farmer from continuing to farm in the midst of the growing city? And why did John Lovin sell his land that he loved so much? Outside Chicago, Jim Marsh finds himself in a similar story.
When my dad graduated high school in Huntley in 1946, there was 13 in his class. I graduated in 1984. I had 62 in my class. My daughter graduated last year with approximately 735. We knew everybody by their first name, last name, middle name, and their nickname. It's hard for the kids to even know half their classmates anymore. There was a lot of farms through here, grain farms, dairy farms, cattle, hog farms. A lot of those farms were bought up and combined into one big piece, and so they start building all these homes in here. I forget how many they were completing. I want to say they're completing 5 a day at one point. You used to have a big sign saying a small town with country charm. Well, it's not small no more, and there's not a lot of country left behind. So we were known as the second fastest growing community in the United States. I think I've been in every suburb there is in the Chicagoland area. There's a lot of people here and very few farms anymore.
Chicago is a big and growing city in the heart of America's Corn Belt. And if you look at soil maps in that area, almost every inch is something really special. This is a global resource. We have some of the best land in the world within striking distance of Chicago. So every acre that we lose in that area is really something precious that's lost forever.
This is one of the biggest things over here, changed is a big library. And this is actually over here is actually the new police station. We may look like we're not close to town, but we can be anywhere. I mean, we can be right in the middle of it in less than 5 minutes. Our next project in the next week or so is to pregnancy check the last half the cows and try and get them through the chutes by myself. But some people, like this girl, she likes to slip her halter, so she doesn't like having a halter on. Yep, you. My great-great-grandfather moved here in 1853. The town was established in 1851. Bought the farm a couple bucks an acre. This year, our family will have celebrated 165 years on this farm. To think, of them doing the same thing I did, not many people can say that. When we're walking out the cow pastures, sometimes when I'm out there, I feel like they're still walking with me. We've been kind of downsizing the last couple of years. We're down to about 20 cows right now.
Rural places seem to do one of two things. They either wither on the vine and become sort of economic ghost towns, as we've sadly seen through much of rural America, or because of where they're located or whatever, they become hip and trendy and people move in and real estate values go through the roof. But either way, whether it's track A or track B, there are no opportunities for local people who want to return there and make a living. If you think about farming, it's kind of weird. If you want to farm, you need land, usually you buy it, and you have to pay, in essence, a developer's price.
Our cows are back in the pasture right now, grazing on land that was sold for $35,000 an acre.
You have to outbid a developer.
$1,500 to $10 to $20 to $150,000.
You have to pay a developer's price for something that you as a farmer have no intention of developing. You pay for a value that you are not receiving.
The taxes got to be on the farm of 177 acres, $35,000 a year. I had to borrow the money to pay the last property tax. So
the farm too that left to me is the people own it are trying to sell it.
Farms need other farms around them, so you have enough farms to have an equipment dealer located nearby, or a grain supplier, or the like. So it becomes a sort of downward reinforcing spiral.
There's not that many agriculture facilities around in Huntley anymore. I'm actually having a hard time even coming up with just one. There was actually 5 implement dealers at one point, 3 milk processing plants, fertilizer place, there was 2 feed stores, so it's more of a challenge for us trying to keep on farming because a lot of our suppliers have left.
as time went on, you lost a lot of things. This just wasn't the demand for it.
When I was growing up, there was a little restaurant that all the farmers would go visit after chores in the morning.
The biggest thing that I really missed was the camaraderie that went with the small, so to speak, small town atmosphere.
John was the only farmer for several years before we left Gwinnett. He was the last one.
Everyone knew what was going on. Everyone cared for one another. That's what's lost with all this is making sure and taking care of one another.
Farmers have a real challenge because there are so few of them. I mean, it used to be that the majority of Americans were farmers, but it has been steadily decreasing to the point now it's about 1% of the population. And with lack of knowledge comes bad things, right? I mean, when you don't understand people, you begin to stereotype them, you begin to think they're different from you and the like.
My high school is in the middle of a cornfield, so all the other schools, when they come for football games, they'll dress in hoedown attire, I guess you could say. And so everyone thinks of us as the Huntley Hicks. Me and my friend that also shows, we find that kind of funny because we're the only two kids that do ag.
You know, when the teacher asks you, what does your parents do? Everybody says, well, my dad's a lawyer. My dad works in Atlanta in a big office, you know? And I'm like, well, my dad farms. We raise chickens and we have registered Angus cows. You know, everybody kind of like, what? You know, what's that all about?
Time passed on, they got kindly made fun of, and old redneck farmer. But my oldest daughter said she'd kill me. She said, Daddy, when you gonna get a real job? As conveniences moved out, people kept moving out, and property value going up, taxes going up. You just cannot have much of a farming operation in that kind of surroundings. I guess really, when you get right down to it, is when my mother had Alzheimer's. And we dealt with that for several years, and I was not going to leave with my mother in that position. And when she passed away, I knew it was time to go. We took fences down, we took a barn, 40 by 100 that we built. We took the chicken house trusses down. It was not so-called a last day till we actually moved in a 2-bedroom apartment. Those days were the last days. Several weeks, you know, I would just break down and cry. And she said, what's wrong? You know, and I was real worried and felt guilty that I'd moved from the farm. And I guess really when it gets right down to it, what my dad and mom would think about it, you know, I always worry about that. And our house was put in a dumpster, and I am so glad that I didn't see that. Yeah, I'm sorry. But, you know, you look forward to the future.
You know, I told him, I said, you know, God closes doors, but then God will open doors too.
John's story is echoed in the lives of farmers and ranchers across America. And one farm turns into another and another, leading us to a national scale of farmland loss.
Off the hill behind the house, their home since spring, sleek black heifers mill about from under trees upon bleached feed come evening. We close our eyes and trust in the dog's bark, the cow's bawl and the sun's hot passion to come and go again till gone.
Despite the advance of urban sprawl, there are practices that slow its progress, and in the midst of our nation's most populated areas, there are farmers who are thriving.
So the very first time that we ever saw it happen, my husband was here, and he called me and said, you better come over here. There are 3 helicopters in our field, and they say United States of America. I thought he was kidding me. I thought he wanted me to come here to do some kind of work. And he said, no, I'm totally serious, and bring Michael.
I was in middle school at the time, and all of a sudden this United States of America green and white helicopter just comes out and lands on in our hayfield.
That was just wild, because we had no idea that they used this place as an emergency landing spot for government helicopters transporting the president or important people to Washington, D.C., which is about 12 miles as the crow flies.
The Cropps and nearby farmers, the Stablers, maintain operations in the midst of our nation's sprawling capital.
The very first metro stop on the underground metro for the city of Washington, it's about 5.5 to 6 miles from our farm lane. That's all the further that it is. All of this ground on the right was farm ground, open farm ground, livestock and cattle and whatnot. And this was actually a pasture field that we ran cattle on. As we moved out from Washington, this all got developed.
The DC area is growing and growing fast. A lot of people don't think of DC as an active farming area. It's one of the best places in America actually to raise livestock because it's mild enough that you can graze animals pretty much year-round.
So right over here, you can see that we're growing houses. This was a cornfield last summer, and this is part of a major development. That's what it looked like last year, right there. It's probably 4 or 5 acres. Out west, I'm not sure people would bother to plant 4 or 5 acres, but here, you have to plant 4 or 5 acres wherever you have a chance. You can still see part of the farmhouse down there.
But even as farmland disappears around them, these families have a different outlook.
I love farming close to the city. I was able to live in a neighborhood where my children could have all of the advantages that only exist in an urban area, meaning in the DC area. We could take the metro and go downtown and go to the Smithsonian on the same day that we weaned calves.
I think the outlook for agriculture in the United States is prosperous. I think the outlook for agriculture in proximity to urban sprawl is viable, sustainable, and prosperous. I'd like to think that Pleasant Valley Farm and this farming operation and our families, we're living proof of that.
Thanks to the nature of their region, the Cropps and the Stablers have found ways to use the city to help make their operations viable.
We've entered into the direct marketing and the produce business lightly here in the last about 5 to 7 years. As we go forward with our proximity to urban sprawl and the ever-expanding city coming closer to us, it creates a wonderful opportunity because our consumers are growing in numbers, which directly ought to correlate to helping us to stay viable.
My sister and I are we're relatively young still here working on the farming operation, and we plan to stay. So I want to be here for when my 2-year-old son comes up and wants to do it, if he wants to do it, and we may have to change and adapt our ways to do, more with less acreage in this part of the country, but we're here to do it.
The Cropps have also taken advantage of direct marketing, along with another creative solution.
we have the ability to probably farm on fewer acres than we would ever be able to do in other parts of the country because we can feed cattle spent brewer's grain. And the spent brewer's grains are a byproduct of local breweries. And when they go to make their alcohol, they put grains and hops in a big vat with boiling water. And then after the water's flavored, they pour off the water and that becomes the alcohol. But the grains and hops that gave it its original flavor are a byproduct. So they might have to pay somebody to come and take them away. But we go and pick them up and can use them as an excellent feed source for our cattle, which cuts down on the amount of land that we actually have to have in order to raise the same number of cows.
But smart farming alone hasn't been enough to stand up to the impacts of urban sprawl. The Cropps and the Stablers have found themselves in one of the few counties in the nation to have local programs that protect farmland.
This is not in the Ag Reserve. The Ag Reserve starts a little further up. Back in the early 80s, Montgomery County set aside 1/3 of its land mass and made it an agricultural reserve so that the main activity, the main focus of anything that happens in the agricultural reserve is always agriculture.
We can do so much through smart zoning ordinances to help curb unwanted sprawl. But many communities, including many rural communities, either don't have land use ordinances or don't have adequate land use ordinances.
But even without local land ordinances, developers could work around agriculture if only they understood what's at stake, as Mark Nelson does.
We never were the guys that went out and broke open a new area. We wanted to work within the environment of the city, but not go out and ruin anything.
We've been involved with getting developers and planners to think about channeling development in the right places. And a lot of developers are open to that. But at the same time, they're being driven by market demands, or being driven by consumer demands. People want housing and the like. The more and more we can do, so the market pull to have a big house plopped down in the middle of a farmer field, if that can be removed.
This was part of our farm. I actually seeded this down with the partner and he sold it and the guy built a big house on it.
If people no longer are perceiving that as something that is good for them or for society.
This 9 acres was the last farm, part of our farm that we had, and the guy came out and built a little bitty house on it.
Well, I'm confident that we're moving some of these things in the right directions, but we have to keep at it year in and year out, educating and informing.
But while the education process continues, more permanent solutions to protect the land are needed.
It starts with the land. There's a lot of other things we need to do in agriculture too. But if we don't have the land, we don't have that fundamental thing that we need to make other changes. The principal vehicle to do that is the use of an agricultural conservation easement.
An easement ensures a piece of ground will stay undeveloped for a set time. But as Randy Stabler knows, these easements are complex, and if not done well, have other implications that can impair the business of farming.
How we do that can directly impact a farmer or a rancher's or an agriculture enterprise's ability to operate.
An easement can tie up the farmer's most valuable asset. As much as a farmer would hate to sell his or her land, selling part of it may be the only way to keep the rest as a viable business.
We've been fortunate enough to have some parcels of the land been sold off. Things were still rough, and we happened to come across a realtor that had someone who was looking for a small piece of land, and we were able to sell just under 10 acres, which kind of got us on track to keep going.
I have a problem when people use the word preserving agriculture. I think in order to preserve agriculture, it's got to be a viable business. It's got to be able to make money, be profitable.
Piotti agrees.
And we can protect the land, but if the land's not even being worked at all because the farmer or rancher can't afford to be in business, it doesn't matter. With a agricultural conservation easement, in most cases, that farmer is going to be compensated for doing that.
The oil pipeline came through and had to use 6 of our acres as an easement to put their pipeline through, and paid big money to be able to do that, and kind of got us on our feet.
It's a double benefit. The land is going to be protected, and the farmer gets some money to make their operation more robust.
The conservation easement helped tremendously. That was the only way that I was able to hang on.
Despite these efforts to protect our farmland, urban sprawl continues. And a long-term solution won't be found until we all begin to see the true impact of each farm lost.
Our nation is going to have to come to a reckoning of, do we want the 2% of the world that produces the food that we eat to live in the United States? I don't think it matters what we name these streets. We're still on somebody's pasture. That will never be a pasture again. And if we really want those people to produce food in the United States, then we need to make it easier for them to do it. We have a whole nother shopping center right up the street. This was really productive farmland 20 years ago. This was a working, breathing farm. We need to have tolerance and understanding and maybe even compassion for what it takes to produce that food. And I doubt that most people that come here ever even think about it. I often think that if people really understood what was given up to put them there, that people might be more willing than we anticipate to say, sure, I'll drive 5 extra minutes and we'll have one less set of shopping centers and we'll keep that farmland right there.
Level the landmarks for living histories of neighbors and families, lending a hand, sharing labor, teaching one another how to give and live together without the sirens wail I hear in the shrinking distance from the lights at night that blot out constellations.
It was hard seeing that as the years progressed, as they developed it and put houses on it, and new families moved into that farm, or to where our farm was. But to me, like I kind of think like I hope people realize that there used to be a farm there. And I hope that they can tell their kids that, you know, there used to be cows and there used to be chickens on this place, and, you know, somewhat humble their kids is my hope.
And this new understanding is growing on the very land that was once their farm. Wendell Buckley, after being interviewed early on for this film, began seeing his world in a whole new way.
Let me say this. When I first met you guys last year, my views changed drastically. It opened my eyes up to a point where I started thinking, let me look around for myself and see what's going on. And the things that I used to see that I never thought about, all of a sudden you start seeing this change in the landscape. Like here, this was all land a month ago. As you can see, they've graded it out right now. You know, you got all these tractors, you got all of this stuff sitting on top of it. You know that this land is about to leave as you know it. And I know I don't totally understand all the farming and all that, but to see all of it leaving, and you start thinking, man, what would happen if you don't have this? That's just unbelievable to me. I just can't, I really can't grasp that. I get my kids now, when they're home from college, we go for a ride. And I show them things because I know for a fact that this open land may not be here in a little while. It just didn't dawn on me before. But having somebody explain it to you and let you know what's going on, it makes all the difference in the world. When we moved out here, I didn't think about what's being taken away. I just saw something coming that's gonna be nicer than what it was. Sometimes I see all these new subdivisions coming and my heart just sinks because it feels like you're losing more than what you're gaining. And you know that there's gonna be growth in order for some people to move in and these houses to be built. But at what point do you stop and say, how much is enough? Listen to the crunching of the grass. They're pulling.
It has made him realize that there's something else too than besides these housing developments. But you know, having someone that was, when we went back and saw him down on his knees clipping his grass with a pair of scissors, at least he has the pride of what we had done there. That was great.
I saw him yesterday. I thought that was him. I thought that was the guy who sold the land, but I wasn't sure. And I just wanted to thank him because I come from an area in Michigan where we don't have these kind of communities. And now I've come here, I've got family. I mean, I've got all type of family. So thank you so much because this has been nothing short of a blessing for me.
And despite John Lovin's heartbreaking decision, he has experienced blessings of his own.
The Lord's taking care of us, and he carried us to a wonderful place. We took that entire barn down and moved it 75 miles down the road, piece by piece, truss by truss, people blowing horns at us, but we moved it down here, and the same boys that helped me put that barn up came down here and we built it back. Now we have about 200 cattle. We also have 18 poultry houses on the farm. Just a wonderful, wonderful life we have on this agricultural world. It's like it was when I grew up. Nice rural community, people care about one another. My son has been with me for, 8 years now on the farm. And my son-in-law and daughter live on the farm. It's something that you kind of dream about. Your kids been involved in your business and hoping to, you know, they'll pass it on just like my dad did to me. I had a boy that went to school with, and he called me and said, Lovin said, you're living your dream life now. I said, yes. You know, I couldn't expect any more. And I love what I do. I love what I do. It wakes me up every morning. It puts me to bed every night. It's wonderful. So, yes, it was a very, very blessing. Now, being closer to Athens, you see a little bit of growth on the other end of the county. This is one of the bigger counties in the state, but we're on the south end side of it, and I hope not. If that ever comes, they'll have to deal with it, but I hope I'm done in heaven with my sweet Jesus, my mother and daddy.
But for others, the danger is much closer.
I just don't feel that anybody can keep on. I don't think you could make a living here anymore.
My mom's getting up there in age. If something would happen to her, there's probably no way for any of us to maintain the farm or keep it going. This summer, we had the barn repainted. Talking with the painter, he was about the same age as my mom, and they kind of made a comment to each other, as this will probably be the last time the barn needs to be painted anyway, because, you know, 10 years from now, it will probably be down. So we probably won't be able to hit the 200-year mark.
And farmers across this country remain where Jim is, on the brink of losing everything. The threat of urban sprawl remains.
The summary of all of this is we're losing farmland, and that should be alarming to everybody. You cannot discount how alarming losing land at that rate is. People do, however. I hear people all the time say to me, wow, we're losing all that land, but there's enough land elsewhere. Some folks can see the fact that we've lost 31 million acres of farmland in 20 years and say, that's not a big deal. That's the mindset we need to turn around. It is a big deal.
Take a drive around your local community. You'll see it. Perhaps you'll see it for the first time. Farmland is disappearing right in front of our eyes. Think back and you'll remember the ghosts of fields there long before the strip mall. As you drive, you'll begin to see that farmland isn't negative space. It isn't infinite, and it won't stand the test of time without appreciation for every acre.
We are not prepared to go hungry, thirst without water to irrigate a meal. We must learn to look beyond ourselves to see our children's future, work together to share a vision of common sense.
Give me land, lots of land under starry skies above. Don't fence me in. Let me ride through the wide open country that I love. Don't fence me in. Let me be by myself in the evening breeze and listen to the murmur of the cottonwood trees. Send me off forever, but I ask you please, don't fence me in. Just turn me loose, let me straddle my old saddle underneath the western sky. On my cayuse, let me wander over yonder till I see the mountain rise. I want to ride to the ridge where the west commences and gaze at the moon till I lose my senses. I can't look at hobbles and I can't stand fences. Don't